On behalf of the family of Pamela Harman, I welcome you here in the celebration of her life. As we open this time of remembrance, let's pray together. Our Father in heaven, we are coming here to this space with heavy hearts. We are asking that you send your Holy Spirit Comforter to be with each one of us, to be in our minds, to direct our thoughts, to remember well, to grieve. As we share stories, we share our thoughts, may we hear each other, may our own hearts be healed. Continue to work in our hearts and in the family as we are needing your guidance. Thank you for the life of such an incredible woman who has invested herself into us. We ask, Lord, that we celebrate her well. We ask and pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, so Pamela Harman was the middle of 3 daughters, and I'm her younger sister, Regina. And today I'd like to talk about something that defined Pammy in many ways, and that is that she had diabetes, which means that her body couldn't process sugars, either refined or unrefined. And this condition was identified in her before she was out of diapers. So for her entire life, she had to deal with something that had to be very regulated and carefully balanced between her and her parents. So with diabetes, you have to be very careful how many sugars you take in. You have insulin that you have to take through a shot every day, at least once, and that keeps track of using up the sugars that you take in. When she was little, the insulin that they had was very rigid or strict. So every morning she would take a shot, and it had some fast-acting insulin that took care of whatever she ate for breakfast. And it had a long-acting insulin, and that covered lunch and dinner, as long as she ate the amount that had already been planned in the morning for lunch and dinner. So there wasn't a lot of free will throughout the day. If she ate too much for lunch, she could always have some more insulin. If she didn't eat enough, then that would be an issue because she would be a little bit under, and there would be too much insulin in her body. So having that restriction on what you can eat and when was something that was present throughout her entire life. One time, before she was a teenager, she went to a friend's birthday slumber party. And it was one of the first slumber parties she ever went to. There was birthday cake. We didn't have a lot of sweets at our house. She had some of the cake. She didn't have enough insulin to cover all of the sugars in that cake. And she had a medical emergency at that slumber party, which is really hard to be a pre-teenager having a medical emergency when you're just trying to have fun with friends. And so she actually went into a diabetic coma from that event. And the doctors told our parents that she likely wouldn't graduate from high school. She wouldn't live to graduate from high school. So she had a very somber event, even though she did not have a somber life. And so Pammy definitely showed those doctors because she did indeed graduate from high school. She did it in 3 years instead of the traditional 4, but I don't think that was to defy the doctors as much as it was to just start living life. Maybe to catch up with our older sister. But she figured out how to manage her diabetes so well that we were able to have amazing adventures. So when I was 13 and she was 17, we spent about 2 weeks traveling alone through Europe. We had first been living at home in Glendale, and our parents were in Europe with friends at an event in Monte Carlo. And then we got from Los Angeles to France on our own, no problems. And then our dad came home, so we traveled with our mothers through Italy. And then our mom came home, and we spent like a week in Paris, just the 2 of us. Made it over to England, spent a week in London, and then we made it back to California. So no medical emergencies whatsoever. And that was just kind of how she was able to live her life, full of adventures despite the structure that she had to maintain. Then she went on to college and she majored in business. And just as she was graduating from college and about to kill it in the business world, she started to lose her vision. And that also was a consequence of her diabetes. So the condition that she had back then, 40 years ago, now is treatable, and it wouldn't have resulted in a total loss of vision. But back then, things were earlier in the development, and so she did lose all of her vision when she was 21 years old. And so just as she was about to start her corporate career, either in downtown LA or maybe a European city, instead she returned to her parents' home to relearn how to do everything, but now without sight. So a few years after that, when she had figured out how to navigate through the world, and she also had her first guide dog, Umpire. She enrolled at Cal State LA, got her master's degree in psychology. Around the same time, she married her husband, Glenn, and she was headed again onto another career path or another adventure. And then her kidneys failed, also a consequence of diabetes. But she was incredibly lucky in that she got an amazing transplant from a young kidney donor who was responsible enough at a young age to put on their driver's license that they were an organ donor. And that kidney lasted her like 40 years, which is one of the longest lasting kidneys, I think, in this state, if not the country. So it was an amazing gift that she was given, yet again. So later in her life, shortly after getting the kidney, she had her son Mark, and she also started teaching part-time at Cal State LA. So where she taught psychology of perception and then also statistics classes. And that's what she did until she was almost 60 years old. So although Pammy guided her own life, it's also important to acknowledge some of the amazing support structures that made all of her achievements possible. And so, just as our parents were about to have an empty nest, she returned to their lives. And our mother pivoted from whatever she might have planned for her empty nest years and acted as if this was exactly what she had planned for the rest of her life. She did whatever Pammy needed, which in Los Angeles for a blind person mainly meant driving her around. And in 1 year, she put 50,000 miles on her car, because her daughter lived 30 miles away, and she saw her almost every day and took her somewhere. So they had lots of adventures and put lots of miles on the car. Glenn, obviously, was an amazing support structure for Pammy and was supportive of all of her endeavors and achievements. And then Pammy's father, our dad, joined in on that when he retired, and then even more so after our mom died. And Mark, as you've become an adult, you've been such a source of strength and comfort for your mom. Although many professors at Cal State, I was about to say Sac State, which is where I live, Cal State LA, would give like a multiple choice test with a Scantron, super easy to score. Pammy decided to always give essay finals because she wanted to make sure that everybody was really learning and not just having that 25% likelihood of getting it right, which meant that all of these people who were supporting her got to read all of those essays and record all of her scores. So not only was she committed to what she was doing, but she also had amazing family who were committed to her. So I think everybody here also knows that not only was she able to give like a 2 or 3 hour lecture at Cal State, but without having any visual prompts, I mean, I'm totally relying on them right now, she could talk for 2 or 3 hours with a different lecture every time, and she just had it all in her memory. But many people here also know that she could give a sermon or a Bible study also from memory without any of the visual prompts, and which was just phenomenal. And her religion and this church in particular were such a source of comfort and strength for her throughout her life. So for those doctors who predicted early on that she wouldn't make it out of high school, she not only persisted despite and through so many challenges caused by her condition, but she did it with a daily persistence that some might consider stubbornness, but it allowed her to live her life fully with a valor in the face of adversity that was incredibly admirable.
Can you hear me? Okay. Pammy was a remarkable person. She not only had a brilliant mind and kind soul, but the care and love she had for her family, not just the humans, but her animals alike, was something very special. We all were the lucky ones to have been the recipients of her love and friendship. There are so many memories I have of Pammy, from childhood onto adulthood. She was always one of my very best friends. And she was one of the few people I could talk on the phone to for hours and hours and hours. And we'd laugh. She'd give good advice. She would lend a non-judgmental ear. She was just an amazing friend. But as children, I remember, there's countless memories, but I remember especially playing Barbies and paper dolls with her. And when Pammy was really little, I didn't want her to play with my Barbie dolls without me being around. And so she wasn't at school age yet, and I remember one day I came home from school, and I went into my room to go play with my dolls, and I saw that all my Barbie dolls had no shoes on. And I went and I called Pammy, and I was pretty upset, and I said, "Pammy, did you go and play with my dolls?" And she goes, no. And I go, "Where are all the shoes?" Well, finally she admitted that she had played with the dolls, and she lost the shoes. We didn't find the shoes, but from then on, for the next several years, when we played Barbies, Pammy was only allowed to have her dolls wear glass slippers, which basically meant they weren't wearing shoes. So for the rest of our life, when we taught, we would joke about glass slippers, and we knew that meant that was barefoot. The other thing too that was just amazing about her, as when we were kids, we would create paper dolls and we'd color them and make fashion. And even though she was 4 years younger than me, I was always so amazed at her creative and imagination at just making these incredible fashions. She just always amazed me. She also was a person that had an inquisitive mind, and she could appear to be quite serious, but I think that seriousness was because she thought about life so deeply. Even when she was such a little girl, she was curious about things that people 2 times her age, 4 times her age, didn't even bother to think about. And I'm going to read you something that Pammy wrote when she was around 12. She could have been 11. I think it expresses and describes her better than maybe I could. So when I read this, just think about a 12-year-old writing this down. It was titled, "I Am I." When I feel as though my soul is crushed inside me, I look towards the sky. And once again, I am whole. I want to reach out and take hold of the horizon, make it so no place is far, everything is near and close. My dreams soar high into the sky. There are no bounds. I love the beauty of life. Trouble circles me and I escape into another world, a world that is filled with friends, love, joy, happiness, and beauty. Shy, some say I am, but that is because I'm cautious. When there's nothing to do, I drift away into my dreams. People I notice and I talk to, but I am still adrift in my dreams. I like to have friends and be a friend because that is the way I am. My emotions control me sometimes, and sometimes I control them. I know the difference between sad and glad. I know pain too, pain for many things. I want no gap between anyone. All this is because I am I. Our parents instilled, as Regina said, a love for travel and art, and I think the 3 of us continued that love throughout our life. But traveling with Pammy, as Regina said, was probably some of the most fun times. I remember on another trip in Europe, it was just the 2 of us, and driving through sunflower fields, singing at the top of our lungs to Billy Joel's album, The Stranger. I remember skiing glaciers in Chamonix with Pammy. She loved Hawaii. We spent endless hours on the beach playing growing up, the 3 of us. And she was also game to do whatever I suggested. I remember one time I thought we didn't have any place to stay and we were driving around Europe and we were in southern France. And so I said to her, why don't we sleep on the beach with all the homeless people? So we got onto the beach, everyone was friendly to us, and didn't last very long because within I don't even think it was more than an hour or two. The police came and rounded everybody up and said, you can't stay here on the beach. But that is just an example. Did this turn off? Hello? Okay, sorry. I think it just shows that Pammy was the kind of person that was game for anything. And she was also the type of person that she loved art, and she would just study art on her own, and going to art museums with her in Europe or here in America was always so much fun, because she could tell you interesting facts about the artist or something about the painting, and it just made everything come more to life. I think she did get that from my dad, because he was the same way. He would always share interesting facts. But she loved art so much that even her first rescue dog, she named after her favorite artist, Picasso, and that was Pika, who later became my mom's dog. But when I think about dogs, the one thing about Pammy is she had such a caring heart that throughout her life, she and Glenn would take in little rescue dogs that no one else wanted, and she would give them the love that they did deserve. And equally as much with the 4 guide dogs she had throughout her life. Pammy loved to ski, and she always had a very beautiful style to her skiing. When she became blind, skiing was something she continued to do. She had to trust her guide explicitly, who often was Richard, but she continued to ski with such fluidity that so many people would stop her on the slopes, and they would think, there's no way you're blind. Are you just wearing the blind skier bib? Which would have been illegal. But that she was able to just ski so smoothly, and people were amazed that she was 100% blind. In college, we lived together, and what I remember the most about that time period was me being at home studying for hours and hours and hours for a test, and Pammy would come in the evening and she'd say, oh yeah, I've got a test tomorrow, and she'd flip through the pages, not barely spend any time, and she'd go, okay, I'm ready, and I'd be like, no way. And the next day, more times than not, she would get the highest grade on whatever class it was and whatever test she took. So she did have a very brilliant mind. There were definitely, like Regina explained so well, tough years for Pammy health-wise. Becoming a diabetic at such a young age, losing her vision, and the kidney transplant. But she always dealt with these adversities with unbelievable positivity. This is something that she wrote in her diary after she lost her vision. I'm going to be quoting her right now. I still can't explain how it happened. There was light, then darkness. Suddenly my eyes were no use. They could never again look and see. The world was shut off from me, or so I thought. Now I realize that I recorded so many memories in my brain that life is not half as colorless. No, it's not vivid, but it's there with a foundation of love. I love that even with one of the worst experiences she went through, she found the silver lining. And I just think that describes a lot of how she dealt with life. Pammy also made decisions fast when she knew that she wanted something. And within weeks of meeting Glenn, she knew that he was going to be someone important and very special in her life. She was, of course, correct, and he did become the love of her life. She also knew that more than anything, she wanted to have kids. And even though the doctors advised her it would be difficult because of all of her medical issues, she decided it was worth the risk, and her biggest joy in life was being their mom. What I loved seeing most recently is how protected and safe she always felt with both Glenn and Mark. She came to depend on them for a lot of things in the past year, and for some people, that needed dependency might also have come with anger at why things were happening the way they were. But Pammy instead just became more appreciative of the two of them and what they did for her. Pammy's strength in how she went about life is what I admired the most. The problems she faced never stopped her from doing things she enjoyed. Just because she was blind, she didn't quit skiing, she didn't quit going to art museums, she kept enjoying life. Sometimes I think each of us for a split second would even forget she was blind because she just carried on so capable, just so capable of doing everything. And like Regina said, her faith and her belief in God were also a huge, huge part of her life. And this church and this family here in this church meant very much to her. She enjoyed being a part of it and helping out whenever she could. I'm really thankful for the last months. After Dad's passing, Regina and Pammy and I got to spend an awful lot of time together going through my parents' things. And during that time, Mark helped us the two. There was a lot of laughter and a lot of reminiscing, but what I love about those times, and I love that I have this memory now, is that it was such a joyful and rebonding experience, because as adults, the three of us had never had that time to just be together. And so what could have been something so sad turned out to be such a blessing. I'm most thankful that I got to experience and be a part of the life of such a brilliant and caring and amazing human being as Pammy was. I know for certainty that Pammy felt blessed to have each one of you in her life as well. She considered all of you family. And back when Pammy was 13 years old, she wrote these simple sentences. When I die, bury my faults with me, but give my gifts to others. She also wrote when she was 13, to my family, a giant part of me is filled with love for each of you. Love, Pamela. I think Pammy would like us to remember that love she had for each of us as we remember all the love that we have for her, our wonderful sister, mother, wife, aunt, and friend.
Hi, can you hear me? My Auntie Pammy. When I think of her and my childhood and life with her, I'm met with memories of her kindness and gentleness towards me. Her caring way of always talking. She knew all my friends' names. She took interest in whatever I was interested in. And she was happy for me or proud of any of my bigger moments that I had had. And she made sure I knew that. Her love and care were always evident, and I think of how wonderful it is to have been able to feel that throughout my whole life. I remember playing dolls, and I had little dog figures in a dollhouse that I had up in Mammoth with her when I was little. And we used Cheerios as water bowls for the dogs, and we talked about the types of dogs that we liked. She brought her guide dog Claudette once to my school to talk to everybody about guide dogs. Some of my favorite immediate memories when I think back on growing up with her as my aunt, I think of how every time I saw her, she always had gum in her purse. And she would always have a new flavor of gum to try. And she would lean over and ask me if I wanted some. And then she would reach around in her bag and find it. And it became this almost ritual every time I saw her. I'd be excited for whatever new flavor she had. And I can remember her doing it so clearly on so many occasions because I was so impressed with how organized her bag was and how she always knew exactly where everything was. I remember many, many other times I'd walk around my own house looking for my mom, only to find her still on the phone with Auntie Pammy after a couple of hours. And I could always tell it was Auntie Pammy on the other end because of the way I would hear my mom laugh. And I loved hearing them laugh together. It always made me want to be a part of it. Once, the three of us, we were shopping when I was very small, and we were trying on clothes, and then after a little while, I think Auntie Pammy must have moved away for a minute, and I leaned over to my mom and I said, "Are you sure she can't see? Are you sure she's actually blind? She can't see just a little?" And I laugh about it now because it just reminds me of how Auntie Pammy never seemed like she was blind, or she never seemed affected by blindness in the way you might think, meaning that she talked about life and described things and did things in a way that never seemed hindered, and if anything, it seemed to me that she often saw life more vividly than most. And that's because seeing isn't just with your eyes, it's with your heart. She saw a deeper, meaningful, more rich side to life. I always felt so lucky to have a constant force of warmth and care from her, and I feel so lucky to have had her in my life to love as well. In recent years especially, she would hug so tightly that she would give you your love truly and deeply, and she made sure that you felt it. And if I think about it, I can still feel it now. This doesn't feel right. It still doesn't feel real at times. I'm not sure I have any words to ease the pain, but I do know that if she could, she would want to wrap her arms around all of us here whom she loved and give us a really tight and Pammy hug.
I was having trouble coming up with what I was going to say today. How could I put the 30 years we spent together into something like that? All the fun and wonderful things we got to do with each other on trips and vacations to New York for conferences and blanking, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Toronto, even though it wasn't a great trip, and we argued a ton, which I like to do with her. All I seem to focus now are on the small things. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, my father, he was in dialysis and he had to go very early, and so we'd wake up in the morning and I'd wake her up most days, or some days I would wake up and she'd be over my bed because she didn't know where she was. And I'm like, "Mom, what are you doing?" No, she scared me sometimes. But so I'd make her breakfast and get her pills and everything. And she'd always want tea, and as everyone knew, at the end, shortly before she passed, she'd always want tea. And I know my dad and I got a little tired of making her tea like 4 or 5 times a day, but she would ingest it by the gallons. At breakfast, I would always start talking to her about what was happening in my life or what was on my mind, and of course I would forget about the tea, and she would never. Miss Jay, I think you guys know too. She would wait patiently until I finished talking and asked if I had her tea. But those moments are really precious to me, the moments that we shared together alone. Well, and with Dad, of course. We used to have to go to UCLA a few times a year to see her nephrologist for a kidney. We'd have to get up before dawn to get her blood work done by 6:30 and then wait an hour or two. We had to go all the way to Westwood, which is a big pain in the morning. Traffic was always terrible, especially either if you go on 405 or over the hills. And after the blood work, we'd have breakfast in the dining car, so it wasn't all that bad. I hated doing those trips, and now I just wish we had more time, because we spent the time talking and just being together. Anyway, the things I'm realizing now are things I thought I would miss so much about my mom are not what I'm missing now. All the trips together, they don't grip me as much as the mundane, everyday moments that we shared, the moments that I took for advantage, that we'd have so many more together. Her smile and laughter are what I miss the most. And I used to be so self-conscious about her smile. If we were in public, and she'd laugh or smile when she heard a little girl or a little baby crying or laughing, and I'm like, Mom, don't. I remember so many times we take the train or the subway, and like, Mom, you look down. Don't look at anybody. I don't want you causing any fights. But I just was always too self-conscious. Anyway, I wish I could return those times. And I wish I could have told her that I loved her one more time. And hugged her. Now I have left so hope that I'll see her again in heaven.
Being crippled is from our dogs, who dragged me down a flight of cement stairs. I met Pamela on September 8th, 1984. We went on a blind date to Topanga Beach for an end of summer beach party. We first headed to a little dive Chinese restaurant called Chinese Kitchen, accompanied by her first guide dog, Umpire. Umpire spent most of the evening trying to scarf up as much food as he could. Tammy had wanted to bring him along, as she was a bit shy, and I said yes, because I was no better. I found that she didn't say much, and Umpy was a great icebreaker. Well, only two of my friends showed up to the beach party, so we only stayed about an hour. Then I remembered my parents were throwing a party at their house on Mandible Canyon, which wasn't too far away. So we decided to go there. It was around 11 o'clock when we reached the house. The only problem was that the lights were out. I guess old people's parties end early. We decided to go back to her house. I have to say I was miserable. I thought she was thinking that I was a huge loser. We arrived in Pasadena around midnight. We talked a little while at Stanley's study, and I was about to leave when Pammy said that she wanted to go outside and get the sand out of her shoes. She said, we can go out and you can see our pool. It has a black bottom. She later told me that she didn't want me to leave. We stood by the edge of the pool, holding hands, and looked into the pool. See, the bottom is black. She said, and yeah, I said, there's no light at all out here. Everything's black. She giggled. I'm sorry, I'm running out of breath. Later, Pam said that I was trembling. She thought that was nice. She said I wasn't full of myself. All I knew was that I had no idea how a date should go, and I liked this girl and I didn't want to lose her. As we walked back to the house, there was a little circle of light near the fountain. I asked her if she danced. She said no. I said good, neither do I. And we danced there under that single light for a long time. That's where I stole my first kiss, ever. That was my first date. Later we said good night, and I walked to my car, looking at my feet because I actually felt like I was walking on air. I proposed to her about 3 weeks later. Pammy said I should ask her again. So I asked her again about a month later, and she said yes. We set the date for her next birthday, August 4, 1985. In the meantime, we continued dating, spending long hours on the telephone. Stanley once presented us with a phone bill with a 7-hour phone call on it. The next one I had, one about as long, on my own to show him. We were married in Pasadena, and when I saw Pamela, she was a gorgeous bride. She took my breath away. We honeymooned in Hawaii, visiting different beaches, swimming, driving around. I read to her from a book called Knott's Trials. Of course, it's a book about a dog and his adventures. That became our book. The 4th of every month, I gave her red roses. It started on our first anniversary, where I gave her 12 dozen roses, more than we had vases or containers to hold them. She came into the house after luncheon with Ingeborg and friends. She entered our little house and stopped to sniff the air. "Smells like perfume," she said. We showed her where all the blooms were all over the house. Around 1988 or 89, Pammy's kidney failed, and luckily for us, she received a donor kidney that lasted an amazing 33 years. Pam was so glad that her mom flew down from Mammoth to be with her. Her dad ended their vacation and drove back down to LA. Pammy got pregnant around Valentine's Day 1991, or so she said. Mark was born in September that same year. Pammy's dreams about being a mother had come true. He was a tiny 2-month premature and weighed 2 pounds 14 ounces. She was so excited about touching him that she got into the wheelchair right after her C-section and visited the NICU. We couldn't have held her back. After some scares with Mark in the hospital, we brought him home. I don't think she loved anyone more than Mark. She was a great mother and would spend hours talking and playing with our boy. We were blessed again and so in love. Pamela was the one that got Mark and I baptized in this church. She started us attending church. This church, in fact, she was teaching psychology at Cal State, Los Angeles, and was beloved by her students. She assisted many of them in attaining their graduate degrees. Our lives went on. We had good days and bad days, like everyone. Ingeborg, her mom, passed away in 2000. Stanley passed away just last November. These events shook the whole family. Pammy was still crying daily over the loss of her father when she passed. Pammy was all about love, love of God, love of family, her dogs, and of life. I will never forget her smile or her warmth. I still can't believe this. She was so young, strong in her faith. She loved her sisters, in fact, all of her family and friends. God created such a beautiful person, such a wonderful soul. I'll miss her so much. Love her so much. Words just can't do it justice. We were only married 37 years, 8 months, and 12 days. And I don't want to say goodbye, Pamela. You were my first and only love. I know I will never love another. And here's the last rose I will ever give to you in this life. I love you.
we all know that Pam's love, her attention, and her faith had integrity, had passion, and an intelligence unparalleled, unreplicated. Pam would come and preach often from this space, and often in various rooms of this church teach Sabbath school and share what she knew was our reality and the hope that we could have in her Savior, Jesus. I think her faith, the way that she lived it out, not just what she said, although there was that too, it moves us. It gave us more confidence in that reality that we currently just hope for. In the early church, Jesus had died and resurrected and ascended and was no longer with them. They still had witnesses of that action, of those 40 days with Jesus and connecting with him and with each other, and then as he ascended, it's hard when someone leaves that you love. And as the church continued to grow in its understanding and as a people, and people kept grabbing on to this hope and this faith because of the witness, because of the lives, because of the hearts of the people that they interacted with, that had this special something in them. They continue to grow, and they were waiting for Jesus to come back. But that hope had not yet been realized, and people that they loved, they started going to their rest without seeing their hope actualized, and it was hard. And to make sense of it, people were trying to figure this out, and Paul, he wrote to a church in Thessalonica, and he had many things to share, many things to encourage them in their faith and their life and the decisions they were making, how they were a community. But then he gave this paragraph that has given so many people such comfort. And he writes this to the other believers in this particular church. And he says this in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13. And he says, "But I do not want you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you sorrow as others do who have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so God will bring with him those who sleep in Jesus. For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will by no means precede those who are asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel and the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and thus we shall always be with the Lord. Therefore, comfort one another with these words." Amen. These words of hope were from Paul to some other believers in another town, in another city. And it's written for us here in this book. This book that is a compilation of the stories, the personal faiths of people across the history of humanity that had an interaction with God, told it to the people they loved and cared about to encourage them. This is the kind of God that is out there, over and against the wrong ideas and the wrong powers that are prevailing, that seem to prevail and seem like they're going to win. And they wrote them down one right after another, and this body of people's faith and their relationship to this God is here. And Pam, she loved this book. She loved the God that of her fathers. She loved this God that was a mystery as well as a comfort, that was all-knowing and powerful and yet so personal. This God that doesn't just make everything okay, but this God that will be with you in times of difficulty and distress. Pam's faith, me personally knowing her, being able to talk with her, just hearing her talk about her own faith and relationship with God, but also recognizing the struggle, the real faith. It wasn't some ignorant, it was a faith with intelligence. It was a faith with knowing that there are hard things in this life that we don't understand. And she herself struggled, and yet she continued to cling to Jesus. It's that faith that has that kind of integrity, that kind of description, not this perfect, never considering other options or other challenges or never doubting. It's a faith that perseveres. And that integrity you saw in her life, in the way that she lived, if you never heard her sermon. And if you did, you understood that it was embedded in her. Who she was her faith. Although it was hard. It was hard. I have the privilege of being able to share with you right now the eulogy. The eulogy it just simply means good words. And the best words that I can give you are the words that Pam clung to each day of her life, knowing that day Jesus was going to strengthen her, hold her up. And I believe those words of Paul, that there will be a day, this great and glorious day, when we will all be reunited in the resurrection at Jesus' return. And that day, I think, is coming very soon. Our love, our faith for each other and for God, it perseveres through the hard things. But yet it continues to ask questions. It continues to pursue truth. It continues to move forward when everything else is telling us to give up. And we can't give up. And Pam never did. I want you in this time to, as we grieve her loss in our lives, as we remember the moments that we've shared with her, the investments that she made into our lives, to remember that this is not the end of the story, but it is a pause, and it is a hard pause. But we can persevere with the faith that if we can't have faith, we know that we can rely on Pam's faith in what she knew to be true and to pursue that and to continue to move forward. A relationship with God and the way that Pam lived it out is one of constance and pursuit of something more, in something that wasn't apparent in front of her always. And I pray that each one of you are inspired and continue to move in that legacy of faith that Pam lived out for each one of us. May God bless you all.
Pray with me, please. Abba, Father, Jesus, our friend, before we leave here today, we choose to pause and share our heartache with you once more. The very real pain we feel is because we are missing Pam so much. She helped us smile, laugh, and prioritize peace. She inspired us to do better in the face of challenges. She reminded us that simple things were worth our attention. They are worth our attention. And she freely gave the gifts of grace and love to family, friends, and everyone she met. How empty we feel without her presence. You must be missing her too. She talked with you often about everything. With her entire being, she cherished her friendship with you. And she worked so others would know and love you too. And now, her voice is silent. But only temporarily. We cling to the assurance that you have overcome evil. We embrace the hope that we will be together again in a place where the heaven and the earth is new. A place where diabetes and blindness, kidney disease and strokes, suffering, sorrow, and sadness and death cannot exist. We claim the promise that nothing can separate us from your love, not even death. Please tune our ears to hear your daily song of unfailing love for us. We've put our trust in you. Show us the way we should go. To you, we entrust our lives. Amen.